Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
If you were born anywhere in the earlier 2000s and grew up playing video games, Ubisoft is a name that could bring a multitude of emotions. Is it memories? Is it fondness? Or is it regret and despair? Feeling like there's absolutely no hope for a game company that used to make games that shaped most kids' childhoods. Because today, Ubisoft is nothing but an off-brand, selfish, and downright deplorable version of its former self.
You're gonna love it.
Its downfall is one of the biggest in gaming history, the history of insanity, and how it ruined Ubisoft in every way.
Oh, Jesus. No. Oh, fuck you!
So today we're gonna go through Ubisoft's story, see where they got their start, and see how their massive downfall came to be. And we'll see if Ubisoft's downfall was deserved, or if it was just a stroke of bad luck. So our story begins in northwestern France. Ew, no wonder Ubisoft is a descendant of the French. And the year is sometime in the early 70s. And the five Guillemot brothers lived on a family-owned farm and were doing farm work and getting introduced to business at a very young age. Each of the brothers were doing small jobs to help pitch into the family business like delivery, shipping, and accounting. So I guess you could say that they were truly the first Door Dashers. And after living through their lives and going to college to study a number of different things between each of the brothers, one of these brothers decided to move back home to rejoin the family business and try to take it to the next level. And this brother was Yves Guillemot. So once Yves moved back to France, he realized that his family's business was on the decline. So he used that business degree he spent 4 years butt-chugging beer and eating ramen noodles to obtain, and started to bring his family business back to life. At the time, CD audio was a brand new thing, before YouTubers paid for fat furry porn. So Yves' brother Claude started selling some CDs and then moved on to starting to sell computers to farmers, all with a 4090 and Fortnite pre-installed. They also created their own little shop where they sold a bunch of farm utilities and other stuff like that. And in this store they also started selling video games, and it wasn't exactly anything crazy or special, it was just what they could get their hands on from their supplier.
Okay, stop this, Brian. How can I help you?
But after one of Yves' brothers, Claude, took a trip to the UK, he realized that his current supplier was selling him these games at double the price than it cost in the UK. And they realized there could actually be a market here, so they decided to start their very own mail order company. So fast forward some time and the mail order company is going very good, better than good in fact. So good that they went from doing ordinary mail orders to getting their products requested from retailers, since they were selling it at half the price of other suppliers. So everybody came together and came to this conclusion. Okay, we really have to see how we can create those games, because we know how to buy them, we know what is working, as we love to create and play those games. So we should organize ourselves to create them. And it was here in the year 1986 that Ubisoft was created. Fun fact, the name Ubisoft stands for ubiquitous software, meaning present, appearing, or found anywhere. A perfect way to describe Ubisoft. So they had a name, had a vision for what they wanted to do, so now they just needed some developers to actually work on some games. So they had some younger adults, ages 18 to 19, and had them come through and show off what they were working on from home in their free time. And after seeing what they had, if they were impressed with what they saw, they would get hired to Ubisoft. And one of these people was the creator of Rayman and Beyond Good and Evil, Michel Ancel. God, I hope I'm saying that right.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Who was just competing in a magazine contest hosted by Ubisoft to win a free computer. But instead of winning a free computer, he got asked to come to the Ubisoft offices in Paris. So he went there, and once he arrived, he spoke to the executive producer for Worldwide Studios, Christine Burgess-Cuamard. What the fuck are these names? Where she then told him to go to a different place in Brittany, so he then went and did that, and he even got drove there by his own limousine. And he arrived at this big castle in the countryside, and there he met Gerard Guillemot, where Michel showed Gerard what he had been working on in his free time. And one of these things that he was showing him was a game called Brain Blasters, which you could still find footage of on YouTube. But at the time, it wasn't finished, so Michel went back home, finished it, sent it to Ubisoft, and Ubisoft sent back a Game Boy. And this was the only Game Boy in France at the time. They sent it to Michel so they could see how it actually works, functions, and so they could get comfortable with it for future projects. Because Ubisoft had a brand new idea for a game that would mix action and puzzle games. So Michel got to work, and he even got his hands on a Nintendo developer kit to think about some more concepts. So with Ubisoft being a fairly new development company and them not having a lot of money, the castle became more of a liability than anything. So they decided to ditch the castle and move to a much more modest office in Paris, which a lot of people weren't very happy about. But you are working for Ubisoft. I'm surprised the offices aren't underneath a McDonald's or a Thai massage. So now that all the developers were hired, it was time to work on their first game. A big common misconception with Ubisoft is that Rayman is actually their first game, but it wasn't actually. It was a smaller PC game that released in 1986 called Zombie, which was a point-and-click horror game with, you guessed it, zombies. And it didn't do terribly for their very first project, but it ended up kind of fading into obscurity towards the early 90s. And the game even got a remake in 2012 for the Wii U called Zombie U, and after reading some reviews, it might actually be a bit of a hidden gem. But now that their first game was made and they had a little bit of experience under their belt, it was now time to really break into the spotlight. So the editorial executive producer, Serge Hascott, God, I hope I'm saying that right. So Serge ended up having a meeting with 3 of the Guillemot brothers, as well as Frederick Hout and Michel Ancel, the 2 responsible for the concept of Ubisoft's very first success, Rayman, which Michel had already been working on animations for this game for 6 months, and after seeing what he had cooking up, they felt that they needed to make this game. Now, it wasn't anywhere near finished, but Michel did have free reign to introduce any of his own ideas or anything that he really wanted into the game. Now, originally the game was intended to be a Super Nintendo release, but that just didn't really end up working out. But after realizing they wanted to take this project seriously, one of the Guillemot brothers, Michel, not to be confused with Michel Ancel, decided that if you want to do this project, we need to bring in a lot of people and a lot of money. We're going to need to organize this project. And that they did, splitting up the development process by handling a lot of the work in the office in Paris and the rest of the work in the office in Montpellier. And here, the Rayman project really started. Rayman was planned to release on a number of different consoles. First it was the Super Nintendo we mentioned earlier, then it went to the Atari Jaguar, then it went to the PS1 where it stayed. But this wasn't just for no reason. As the game was being created, the project grew bigger and bigger. So as the product grew bigger, more people were needed for the project, going from under 5 developers to over 100, which definitely helped in their case, but obviously ended up making the project even more expensive. But Ubisoft had big dreams. They wanted to compete with the Goliaths of gaming at the time, Konami, Sega, Nintendo. So how do they beat Japan at their own game? Simple. Use the newest and best hardware at the current time that was faster and better than anything Nintendo or Sega had. And with Rayman, they had the potential to be up there with the greats of the gaming industry. And so Rayman was released in 1995 and was added to the shallow game catalog of 10 games for the PS1. And this helped them even more than they could ever imagine, because if you just bought a console that you spent hundreds for and there's only 10 games on it, chances are you're gonna play most, if not all of those games. So Rayman was set up for a success, and a success it was, reaching over 900,000 worldwide sales in just 2 years. It was safe to say that Rayman was a smash hit and solidified Ubisoft's place with the other great developers at the time. Alright, so we're getting pretty late into the video, so we've gotten to the point where I've stopped caring about how my hair looks. After the success that was Rayman, Ubisoft decided that they needed to spread their work farther than they ever have. So with the boatload of $80 million that they made off of Rayman, they decided to expand their offices, buying some offices in China, Canada, Spain, Italy, and Morocco. But Ubisoft wanted to break into the American video game market. So after a multitude of different tactics to try to grow the brand and make as much money as possible, making a free-to-play mobile game as well as purchasing Red Storm, which is another development company that we'll talk about later, they now had all the means at their disposal to show North America what they had cooking. And this is when the Tom Clancy franchise was created. Tom Clancy was an instant success and did exactly what Ubisoft needed it to do, to show the North American market that Ubisoft was there to stay. Now that Ubisoft has made a name for itself and built up some hype behind it decided to take some inspiration from other game developers after seeing the success that was the Metal Gear franchise. So Ubisoft went on to create their own take on a stealth game, but only for the Xbox, and that was called Splinter Cell, which was an instant success, and Ubisoft would take this and keep pushing, releasing games like Prince of Persia, Rayman 2, Beyond Good and Evil, and Ghost Recon, as well as purchasing the rights to a certain game that we're going to talk about a little later on. And of course, one of, if not the most iconic series Ubisoft has ever created, Assassin's Creed. With Ubisoft now having several amazing titles under their belt, they had the confidence to try out really whatever they'd like. Originally taking inspiration from a book called Alamut, which was a historical and philosophical novel about Hassan ibn Sabah, the leader of the Hashishin, also known as the Order of Assassins. So the team took a snapshot of what they had in mind, showing off the gameplay, the setting, and the main character. Showing the character running and jumping off of walls, stealth killing enemies, and a fight sequence that ends with the character running off with their horse into an open field. And after seeing this, everyone was on board, so after some animation work and a nice little overhaul to the graphics, they figured this game could be another great IP. So they started putting more money into the project and into the team itself to help build a better engine. But there was still some work that needed to be done for both the world and the story, so they got together with historians and Middle Eastern specialists, as well as getting a visit from the Aga Khan movement, the descendants of Muhammad and the first Ismailis, aka the very first assassins themselves. And they were mainly there just to see if they were even being portrayed correctly in the game. But what was even worse than getting their lives possibly threatened over the research was trying to fit this game into a brand new engine in the current year. It was safe to say that the development process for the first Assassin's Creed was hell on earth, and the game wouldn't have been half as good or even came out if it wasn't for the love that these people had for not only the game, but the people around them making these games. But it did end up coming out, and as you could imagine, it worked out perfectly. Assassin's Creed was better than a smash hit or just a success. It was everything, and everywhere you looked, you saw something relating to Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed still is to this day one of Ubisoft's most iconic and popular IPs that they've ever created, but like 90% of all of their IPs, it has been milked more than a prostitute cow. But their next project would be the start to their insanity and would become the catalyst for their downfall. So Assassin's Creed was a major win for Ubisoft, we already determined that. But they weren't done. Ubisoft was still hungry for the hearts of gamers all around the world. And most importantly, they wanted to feel some of the success that Treyarch and Bungie felt after the hype that was World at War and Halo 3. So they took advantage of the fact that the studio they had a partnership with was a German development studio by the name of Crytek. And with this partnership, they had the rights to a game with a huge amount of potential. Far Cry. Now, Far Cry 1 was originally developed by Crytek themselves, and Far Cry 2 is when Ubisoft took over. And depending on who you ask, Ubisoft took the Far Cry series in the best possible direction, or Ubisoft completely ruined any potential that the series ever had. And you can't really blame either side. On one hand, it did feel like some things like the story, and obviously like the open world and the guns were far better in something like Far Cry 2 compared to Far Cry 1, while creating mechanics that would become necessities for first-person shooters going forward. But on the other hand, this sparked into a down spiral of the same old repetitive bullshit that is Ubisoft's current identity. But it would probably be fair to show what Ubisoft did do good for the Far Cry franchise, giving you a much more thought out and realized open world, as well as different side characters, weapons, and just the overall way that the world worked and the mechanics inside the world that made you feel like you were inside of a game world instead of the game world revolving around you. Giving you for the most part, a seemingly better story that's usually along the lines of revenge, because Ubisoft, as well as a vast array of a sandbox that you could choose to do whatever you want in, whether it be stylish stealth kills without being seen by a single soul, or just plain old dumb fun just to make you laugh. What Ubisoft did for the franchise was give players a system that wasn't exactly the best or the most fluid, but damn was it fun. So now with Ubisoft earning their reputation as a titan in the gaming industry, their confidence got a little bit bigger than the amount of skill they had as developers. And more importantly, they got way too comfortable with the design and gameplay loops that they created in the past. Look at any Ubisoft game from the mid to early 2010s. Climb tower, press button, unlock more map. Climb tower, press button, unlock more map. Climb tower, press button, unlock more map. And this is just one example of this happening in 3 different games that take place in 3 completely different franchises. Ubisoft was loved by many at the time, and nobody thought they could fail, and neither did Ubisoft. They had a lot of confidence, too much confidence in fact, so much to the fact that they were just repeating the exact same gameplay loops in every game with little to absolutely zero changes. Let me show you some Far Cry 3 and some Far Cry 4 gameplay. Yes, the map may look different and you may have different weapons, but you're still clearing out the same outposts, looking at the same healing animations after being shot by the same bad guys in the red clothes. You'll see some new additions, new vehicles, new weapons, as well as making it easier to acquire these items, which is not bad for the direct sequel to Far Cry 3, but is horrible when it's still being reused 7 years later in Far Cry 6. If you look at 90% of Ubisoft's classic IPs, every single one of them has been milked and ran straight through the ground. And these games had a huge amount of potential at the start, but of course, thanks to Ubisoft, all of the bad parts about these games get brought into the next game, but worse. And all the good parts about the game don't even get fully realized and reused until it's just something that becomes a burden inside of the game. Look at Watch Dogs. It gets showed off at E3 2013, and everybody could not believe what they saw. But then it released, and, well, we know how that went. And later that same year, Assassin's Creed Unity would release, which came out with an abundant amount of FPS stutters and glitches on day one. Then just a week later, Far Cry 4 would release, which got looked at as Far Cry 3 with a new map and a helicopter. And now today everybody looks back on these games with rose-tinted glasses because they're 12 years old and this is what they grew up with. And I do get it. I think Watch Dogs 1, 2, and Far Cry 4 are pretty good games. They're not masterpieces or the best games ever made, but they're pretty good games. Except for AC Unity. I went back and recently replayed that and you will still randomly get sucked into garbage pails and be stuck on poles when you're trying to parkour through the map. It's dog shit. But to give AC Unity some credit, at least the game does run smoothly and it does look very beautiful. But whether you like each of these 3 games or not, a running theme with a lot of Ubisoft's IPs is that it has a promising start, had its best game in the series, then either replicated it until it became a chore to play, or just made something awful and ruined the series. And even today, Ubisoft is still trying to hold on to their old IPs from their glory days, and any new IP that they make, well, it just doesn't do good at all.
People say that I'm crazy. But when you wake up in the morning, you look at the same news that I do. Through your eyes, not filled with horror.
This is the world? This?
As much as Ubisoft wishes things could go back to the way they were, being colossal titans in the gaming industry, having all the confidence that you were willing to fund passion projects that not only made some people's childhoods, but even could have shaped their actual life. But it's not that simple. Ubisoft has tried to make a comeback and time again they've just flopped. And it's turned the company into something it never would have been before. Charging full prices for games riddled with glitches and basically just being a DLC of the game that came before it, even considering having people pay monthly subscriptions for games that are already filled with microtransactions. And not to mention that whole SA case that got the former executives of Ubisoft arrested, Ubisoft does not deserve to make a comeback anymore. This is different than just being lazy and picking the safe route on every game you make. This is turning into a horrible, greedy, and downright deplorable company. And to say that it's standing in its former shadow is an understatement. It can't even reach its former shadow. And that's why I feel like Ubisoft's downfall is deserved.
Oh, good. You feel better now? Get it out of your system? Good. Maybe now we can finally shoot some goddamn guns.